Good evening, everyone. Welcome. These are all special, and I always get excited. I say I'm excited about everything. But tonight's guest, not only is this the 40th episode of Every Day is a Story All Its Own, which I truly am honored that everyone has liked this, and all of our past guests have been amazing. I'm just going to tell you a quick story. We have so much to go through, and I haven't been around for about 3 weeks. The tour with Cyrus Avery, you can go to my Facebook, you can go to my Instagram, you can go to Threads, and you can see there's sort of a travel log there and pictures. People were nice at all the schools and performances to post pictures of Cyrus. I am really in love with this guy, what he stands for. The gap between us is narrow, even though we lived 100 years apart. So go ahead and look at that in 2 weeks. Next week, I'll tell you about at the end of the show. I'm going to do a show on Chautauqua, so that specific art form, it'll just be me doing a creative communication, telling you about that. So let's move on. So let's go, if we could, to 1991. I am 22 years old. I have just gotten a dual degree in English literature and theater. I am sending out my writing. I have an agent in New York. I have an agent in Philadelphia. They're keeping me pretty busy. I'm learning a lot about the business. A year before Dances with Wolves came out. Now, when I was in high school and middle school and all, I knew I wanted to be an actor. In high school, there were 5 actors on my wall to inspire me and challenge me every day. Those actors were Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton, Jeff Goldblum, Tom Hanks, and Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner is a huge inspiration to me as a writer, as a director, as an innovator. So in 1991, his follow-up to Dances with Wolves is Robin Hood. And I'm sorry, I'm using new equipment tonight, and this has been mirrored. Let me just see real quick here, go to camera, see if I can fix this. I don't want to mirror my camera. There we go. So I'm learning new equipment. You probably are all noticing a difference. Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, and our guest tonight wrote that piece. He also wrote and directed Houdini, which I revisited the other night. Wonderful, wonderful. So there's a lot to get through. He's here tonight. I have a whole slideshow of his photography, which is absolutely stunning. I don't understand how he accomplishes it, and so he's going to enlighten us tonight. We're also going to talk, he is a writer, teacher at heart, Writing the Alligator. This is about screenplay writing. He wrote another book called The Creative Person's Success Manual. But in 1991, I watched that movie. Fast forward 33 years, and a guy that I have written a screenplay with, I can't say too much about it. It's making the rounds on the West Coast right now, has some real interest. You met him a long time ago on the show, sent me a PDF and said, you really should read this. It's called A Creative Person's Success Manual. It was written by my guest tonight, Pen Densham. I got so much out of it, and I said, wow, we're really on the same wavelength here. Well, a year after that, I got an email from his publicist, who I've worked with for a really long time. She's made a lot of my best guests here possible. And she said, would you like to have Pen Densham on the show? And I said, yes, please. So here we are. So I'm going to roll our 13-second opening, come back, read his bio, which is long, but as I always tell you with a long bio, he has absolutely earned it. And then we will dive right in. We have a great show planned for you, so welcome. And just as simple as that, with music by my often collaborator, Knight Berman Jr. Pen Densham is a fine art photographer whose work blends realism and abstraction, transforming the natural world into immersive, almost cinematic experiences. Beginning his artistic journey in England, where he captured nature in the New Forest and early portraits for the BBC, Pen has consistently used photography as a way to process emotion and celebrate beauty. After rediscovering his passion through his daughter's playful use of his old cameras, he developed an intuitive style that treats the camera like a paintbrush, capturing koi as water spirits, streams as sculptural flows, and kaleidoscopic mirrored reflections he calls organic mandalas. And I'm going to show you a slideshow of some of that work tonight. Truly stunning. His images, entirely created in camera, keep that in mind, evoke Monet's lyricism, Pollock's spontaneity, and Freeman Patterson's person's reverence, yet remain wholly original. Exhibited internationally from Los Angeles to Monaco, his art has been praised for its color, rhythm, and spiritual immediacy. Equally accomplished in film, Pen is a two-time Oscar-nominated screenwriter, director, and producer whose career was mentored by Norman Jewison and launched with the global success of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Through Trilogy Entertainment Group, he produced films such as Backdraft, Larger Than Life, Moll Flanders, and Houdini. He executive produced nearly 300 hours of television, including personally thanking him so much right now for that, Outer Limits, and The Twilight Zone to network reruns. He's collaborated with Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman, Jodie Foster, and recently executive produced the Oscar-nominated Harriet. Pen also authored the best-selling screenwriting guide, Riding the Alligator, and is a sought-after speaker on creative authenticity. And you guys know authenticity is the beginning and end of everything for me. A creative person's success manual he also wrote, which I told you about. His archives are being acquired by the University of Toronto, cementing his legacy as a multidisciplinary artist who unites photography and film through a shared vision of intuition, renewal, reverence for life's impermanence. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Pen Densham.
Thank you.
Welcome.
That's a long list to go through. I'm sorry you had to do all that. Just happy to be here. Number 40. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a great way about you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love what I do. And all the things that you talk about, intuition, authenticity, passion, really resonate with me, which was so wonderful. Because I'll get to it when we get to the film. So guys, we're going to do this kind of like a 3-act play. We are going to talk about Pen, rightfully so, his film and television career, which is incredibly impressive, as you'll find out if you don't know already. Then we're going to spend a good amount of time on his photography, which is stunning. And maybe he'll give away a little of his secrets about how he creates it, because it is just amazing. And then we are going to talk about his work in sharing how to do this work, which can be difficult and daunting. And I will tell you, I had imposter syndrome tonight. Half an hour before the show, my wife will tell you, I can't believe who my guest tonight is. So by the age of 4, you're appearing in your dad's productions. He was a cameraman for short films and riding a live alligator. So what was that experience as a young person doing this kind of work?
Well, my folks, my mother and father, both were from the film industry. My father was a cameraman, and his identical twin brother was a cameraman. And they were making, my father's making short films for the movie theaters. One particular film went out with African Queen, which was called Strange Cargo, and it featured people who had strange pets. And I always figured that my parents didn't have much money because they took me along with them, so I don't think they could afford babysitters. So I got to see how cameras caused crowds to come, and I also got to go with them when they went to Water Street and met with the people who were distributing the movies, which was called a company called Anglo Amalgamated, and these people were Nat Coyne and Stuart Levy. So these magical things were going on. I go into a building and there was this enormous theater, and there's these pieces that my folks had worked on, and as I said, there was one day when I thought my mother couldn't have possibly been there because my father filmed me riding a live alligator. Yeah. And I remember going into this woman's home. She literally had fish tanks in the walls with living alligators and crocodiles in them. And she seemed to be much more concerned about keeping me away from the crocodile in the fish tank, because I remember her really getting, don't go near that, But the alligator, that didn't seem to bother us. So I'm affected by those experiences in ways that I've never lost. I yearn to cast spells. I want my life to be meaningful. I want to do things with it that cause emotions with people. I just didn't want to be in a box. And my mom passed away when I was 8, and life got very difficult. My father married somebody who was very emotionally destructive. And I went through a period where I was trying to be an artist and struggling. I was being put down by my father and my stepmother. And it gave me an outsized desire to support other people who are creative. It made me vulnerable, realize the vulnerability of being somebody who we're trying to create things that have never existed. We don't have structures and things. Sometimes you can. I've written scripts because I got 4 lines of dialogue that so made me cry, and I felt so empowered by them. I wanted to write the rest of it. And how do you explain that to logical people? So part of my life experience has been trying to understand who I am and how I get my best work out of me, and how to overcome imposter syndrome, doubt, take rejection, discover framing devices which is excuses that you give yourself so that it's easier to phone people. And I was very lucky. I ran into, I quit England when I quit school when I was 15, tried to start my own businesses, quit England when I was 19, thinking I was a washed up failure, and went to Canada and found a country that gave funds to people with ideas. And it didn't matter what your education was. They wanted to try and help their arts because they were looking at bolstering their culture against the American input. And so they financed innovation. And I founded a hippie commune filmmaker home. We all shared the kitchen, and we all cooked in orders, and we had those charts of who does what. And one of the people that came in there was John Watson, and we founded our own film company. I think we were about 22 or 23, and started to learn with no funding. But luckily we get a contract. Then we begged the film processor people to wait till we got paid, but let us shoot, or we'd shoot something and freeze it until we could afford to process it. And worked with a couple of other companies along the way, one of which, was making films with Marshall McLuhan, which again was such a benefit because I'm looking at people who are free thinkers, people who haven't been boxed in by life. And McLuhan was watching movies and trying to figure out why an audience fell into a trance while they were watching a movie, and why they were moving their faces with the characters on the screen. And all of those questions fascinated me. And we figured out to survive, our films had to sell. To sell, they had to win awards. We thought people would come and look for your movie. They would say, they come find your movie and say, "Oh, you're good, you get an award." Oh no, you have to enter them and you have to pay for them. And luckily along the way, we got a couple of Oscar nominations, and actually won a lot of awards. Our short films in Canada were very creative, very innovative, very visual. And John Watson was one of the best editors in Canada. He won more awards than any other editor at that time. And I used to shoot with this idea of trying to make magic. I just couldn't be bored. I just couldn't stick a camera down and just let it sit there. To me, the camera is part of the story. I say I make movies, not talkies. That ended up where, after a long period of self-doubt and a long period of despair, I think, at the thinking that I would never be any good as a writer, the CBC had put on a show, which one of our filmmaker friends mentioned to me, where they were looking for young filmmakers to come in with projects. And so I decided I would write my first screenplay. Had no idea how to do it, didn't know the format, wrote a half-hour drama, and they said yes, they would let me make it. And that experience was horrific, because we used an all documentary crew. We never worked with actors before. And John was helping me produce it. And, we edited it. And John used to edit everything as tight as possible. No gaps, no repetitions, keep the energy going. And when we looked at the first cut of my movie, it was awful. It was like, and I thought, okay, I've let everybody down. What do I do? Oh God. And so I asked John to go to the trim bin. And, in those days you had to go find the trim, look at the number, and peel the tape back. And we put it like the beginning of a take, so that the actor had a pause before he spoke, and it looked like he was thinking. And I'm going, oh, I've really screwed up. Let's go back and try and patch this thing up. And when we did, I thought I should never be allowed to direct again. And it won multiple awards, and it was reviewed as the best movie of any length ever shown on television in Canada. And you're going, no, I fooled you all. And then Norman Jewison phones up and says, how'd you like to come to Hollywood for a year and we'll mentor you? And I'm going, and to be honest, I looked at my mother in what she would have wanted. And I had a wife and a family, and we had a company and we had staff. And I thought, I have to take the chance. And felt very, very vulnerable, very overwhelmed, but did it. And and then I managed to meet Stallone, who was in the movie that was being made by Norman Jewison, which was called Fist. And Stallone had a lot of time on his hands. So I got to talk to him, and this was right after Rocky. And we got to show him some of our movies that we'd made, all kinds of things, sports and art and nature. And our films always had this really emotional visual drive to them. And John's editing was fantastic. It really, it blew people away, because we have one film that got 5.5 minutes long that got applauses in movie theaters, and reviewers would go and see it. And that impressed Stallone, because we weren't Hollywood. And when he did his first feature film, which was called Paradise Alley, he invited us to be working with him as kind of like background people. We shot the EPK, we did the trailer. We were suddenly playing in Hollywood. We could go home anytime to our own, but we got to play in Hollywood as opposed to having to fight to be there. And when he did Rocky 2, he gave me my own film crew to shoot extra scenes behind while he was doing the fights. And then he asked us to help him solve problems with the finished cut, which wasn't working well enough for them. And John and I, and with a couple of other editors that we worked with, brought in, showed them how you could get more emotional power out of their material than they were used to getting. Because in Hollywood, you get the pieces. And in our world, we had to weave them, because when you shoot documentaries, what you get is what you get. And if you don't make it really cool and don't figure out how to edit it well, you don't get to make another movie. You get to have to work for the other guys. So, we were very incentivized to try and figure out how to make our movies look good. So we applied that to Stallone's movie. And suddenly we were in the Hollywood world, and people were looking at us as film doctors and paying us $10,000 a week to fix movies. And we're going, are you crazy? We made movies for $10,000. What is this? But we were still sure we couldn't write, still sure that Hollywood had the real writers, and we were the wannabes, the church mice. But after we developed a couple of films with the studios, because of our relationship with Rocky, which was Rocky 2, which was such a success, we were now being given opportunities. And we fixed a movie called Victory, which had John Huston directing it. We worked on, I'm not going to remember the name of it now. And we consulted on Footloose a little bit on Coal Miner's Daughter, and Nighthawks was the one I was trying to remember. And so suddenly we're playing in Hollywood without, and with an enormous amount of money coming in. So we decided we would open our company up here and see if we could last long enough and actually make the transition, which is, I always said to Norman Jewison, I never know whether to thank you or blame you. Because, you lose, when you come to Hollywood, you start to work for the Pentagon. Each studio is its own Pentagon, and they want to make the last war. And so, it was a growing and an extraordinary experience, and I'm so lucky. And I've got as many. One of the things I really want to do is demythologize myself. I have more scripts on my shelf and more rejections than I have got successes, and I don't want to be seen as somebody who's just went out there and did it and it won. I want you to know all the times that I screwed up, when I didn't have the courage to go forward. I say, when people say, what was your biggest mistake? I say, my errors of omission. When I didn't have the courage to push myself forward, when I doubted myself, or I thought I'd be too pushy and obnoxious, or I thought I would make a fool of myself. And when I held back from those and I look backwards, I go, why did I do that? And so, but luckily, some of my opportunities, and my partner John and I, we would encourage each other, and So we got a few shots, and those few shots, some of those paid off, and Robin Hood being one of them.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we're gonna unpack some of that.
Cool.
I love that.
You can't just put your hand up and say, "Stop talking, Ben."
No. I have my notes here, and I tracked it great. I want to give the audience just a little bit of some of the research that I did, and some of the things that you were too modest to say. But thank you, because especially Every Day is a Story is such a teaching tool. You said so many things that are of value. So you and John, as you said, you started with these visual short films on nature, underdogs, sports heroes. It seems that you've done so many far-ranging things, and you brought new to Robin Hood, you brought new to Houdini, you brought new to the Magnificent Seven, which is always important to me. What are the things that interest you most in life that you want to bring to life in film?
Well, I think underdogs and a sense of altruism have been things that we've had themes about. We always like to make films where people were going up against adversity and found ways to conquer it. One of the weird things I noticed was that a lot of my scripts, when I was writing what I call life scripts, which is the scripts that the studios didn't expect to get from you, the ones that don't have a pattern or a form or aren't in a genre, the ones that seem stupid to write because they're not going to work, those got made. And they got made, and I think because there was more human consciousness in them. And sometimes, as I said, I would have just the instinct that something was in me that needed to be expressed. And working with McLuhan, I tried to understand what the purpose of a story was. And I think stories are to heal. I think if you look at Joseph Campbell, and he talks about the hero with 1,000 faces, they're all the same story. When you look at it, we're biologically driven, I think, to listen to stories because they hold the tribe together. And when he says that they're myths, those myths are there to give strength and cohesion to the group that holds together, so that by collaborating, by being moral, by learning to help underdogs, by not being selfish, you're creating an environment where the young can get into the future. And I think that got bred for, because as people if you didn't collaborate and hold the tribe together, then the young died and they didn't get to get into the future. And so I think that morality is one of the key things, and we keep seeing it repeated. Law and Order, I don't know how many years they've been running now, but it's the same thing. Somebody tears the fabric of society, and then the worker bees go out and they catch them and stop them, sew up the bad patch, put a patch on it, and then life goes on and the society's coherent again. And the other thing that I'm fascinated by is, what is the real reason we watch a movie? And what was going on when McLuhan saw people's faces moving? And he said they're in a trance. And what I discovered over the years is that babies mimic the mouth movements of the people around them from the moment they're born. And what is happening when we're watching a movie or we're reading a book, or when we're even watching television or sports, is that we have these mirror neurons that are firing off, and they're firing off in the same places in our brains as if we were doing those actions. And what's happening is, with a story, you're actually evaluating your own life experience, and you're strategizing in the back of your head as you're watching the characters play out in the foreground, which then means that the characters must be struggling, which is why they say all drama is conflict, because there's nothing to learn from success. In other words, if Superman didn't have kryptonite, there's nothing to learn. He's going to win. And so you don't have to worry about but if he has to use strategy, we then look at ourselves to look at the strategies and are unconsciously adapting those strategies, or choosing to reject them. So I won't go into that room because Freddie's in there. It's like, because if I know I'm 15 and I'm having sex and there's a person who wants to stab me, you start off with that level, and then you go to, really evolved and very highly conscious pieces like Ordinary People or something, where we're learning about life and the choices we must make in order to be able to survive with our children. And they say there's only 7 major plot points, because I think there's only 7 major biological things: not getting eaten, Jurassic, Jaws, Alien, or love stories, which is, proving to a mate that you'll stay with them. It's always that you're going to stay there and raise the genes. And then you have the underdog stories, which is where, Robin Hood puts together an ensemble of underdogs to take on a greater criminal or a greater evil. And those stories appeal to me, and they appeal to, I think they appeal to humans. And one other observation is that when an actor plays a role, and as a director, I'm very conscious of this, you have to feel in you, which isn't measurable. It isn't a thing that you can, turn around and say, I can teach this. You have to feel the performance in you as the director. Otherwise, it won't communicate emotion. And when actors don't communicate emotion, we call it bad acting. So when I say what are stories, they're to heal. And
Wow.
I'm fascinated because you've written a book on this. So,
Yeah.
what are your feelings about it?
They very, very much align with yours, and this is like a masterclass for me listening to you. So I'm hesitant to say too much at all, but a big thing, just real quickly, and I'm watching the clock because I want to get to your photography. Like scientifically, our brains, when we're watching someone in peril, when we're watching the conflict mount, right? Mammoths, 3 uses of the knife, and so on and so forth, and it's ratcheting up. Our brains are producing all these, oxytocin, these things and when there is the resolution, when there is the victory, we are flooded with these feel-good chemical. So story is scientific. I'm with you. When I wrote my first novel, I wasn't introduced to Joe Campbell yet. And then I got really, really serious about my work and the hero's journey and all of that. When I went back and analyzed that novel, it was the hero's journey. And I said, instinctively,
Yes,
we don't always get it right because we overanalyze, we get in our own way. Instinctively, yeah, like you said, the stories are so, and I bleed them down to 2. Boy Meets Girl and Stranger in a Strange Land. But I would even argue that Boy Meets Girl is Stranger in a Strange Land because, every time you fall in love, you're in a new country, you're in a new world. So just awesome. So I want to sing your the things that you've been acclaimed for,
yeah.
and then we'll get on to your
Got to
photography.
respond one thing: oxytocin. Yeah. I mean, holy crow! I've just finished reading a book by a friend of mine called The Moral Molecule, and it's about oxytocin and how we it is the reinforcement of morality, and that's what we are doing. Is we are firing off. When you watch a movie, I say the movies are concerts of the emotions, but they're actually concerts of our chemistry.
Yes. Oh, I could talk to you for days. So anyway, you were talking about being in the commune and all that. In 1973, you did Life Times 9. You took 9 students from Toronto, producing, directing their short films about life, and you got an Academy Award nomination for that. So doing the good work, helping others, rewarded, which I love. 60 awards. So you mentioned, I'm just going to fill in the gaps, folks, with some hard data. 60 awards before you wrote that first short film, which was your 30-minute piece, If Wishes Were Horses. So folks, research this stuff, seek it out, learn from it. Then in 1977, you and your partner, John Watson, got the Silver Jubilee Medal from Queen Elizabeth II for contributions to the art in Canada. So folks, if you do the good work, if you go from your heart, good things are going to happen to you if you're good. 1981 Oscar for best doc, short subject, Don't Mess with Bill. And Bill was, remind me, I didn't take good notes. He was this
wonderful 83-year-old guy, looked like a little miniature Albert Hitchcock, and he had stage boy in 1912 in the in the English theaters, and he said he befriended the Asian jugglers, and they taught him jujitsu. And he then tried to figure out a defense system called Defendo, where there was only defense moves, and so no one could attack anybody, but everybody would be confident. And we made a film on him when he was 83, and he was throwing people around and teaching defense. And his dream was to be of service. And he claimed he was there when Houdini actually got punched in the stomach, which is fascinating.
Yes.
And we were trying to actually start a show called The Butterfly Years, which was going to be about people who had gone on after retirement to do incredible things. And I couldn't get, we were trying for like GM and people like that to sponsor it. Couldn't get it. So we just packaged the piece that we'd done as a demo on Bill, and it ended up getting nominated, and he got on the Tonight Show, and he threw Lou Ferrigno around. And,
wow.
It was a fantastic opportunity just to, again, be around an underdog and, see how they changed the world. And they took and did their own things without being in boxes. And we're very inspired by that. The people we made movies about frequently were people that were going against the system and having to find their own form and courage to do it, because the system isn't designed to recognize the new. And it's designed to support there's a thing called Ouroboros, which is the snake that eats its own tail. Yes. And to break into that system, especially with education, which is people teaching education, you really have to help them to understand what you have and why it's valuable. And part of what we also had to learn was selling, because as artists, we frequently would create something or see something that the pragmatics, the people that build your airplanes or do the budgets, or couldn't understand yet until you helped them. And I called it building a bridge backwards. In other words, you had to explain things without talking down, without being impatient to people who didn't yet understand why you were excited. And you had to do it in terms of what their successes would be if they were associated with your work. You can't get people to buy something because it's good for you. You have to get them to understand that maybe helping you is good because it's going to do something for their career, or that they find a value in what you're doing that's personal. And so again, part of our journey was kind of figuring out how to survive, because if you couldn't sell, you didn't end up being able to get your dreams on the screen. And John and I had a lot of freedom in Canada, and getting the freedom here to make more things was kind of frustrating. We used to stay with something and get it done. Here, that didn't work. Here, you had to then break it up and try 4 or 5 different things simultaneously, and then maybe one of those would take off, and then you fight that one. Sometimes we fought projects for years to try and get them made. We had a project on the Flying Tigers, which we were probably on for 15 years trying to get it made. Underdogs flying against incredible odds, prior to World War II, great young guns in the air. And a story, again, that was built around the philosophy of the chief character, who was a guy that had avoided responsibility. And so, again, what we learned was what I call the nugget, which is, what is the purpose of a story? You put a story inside your character, and it becomes the reason for the movie. And in that particular instance, it was a story that John and I were collaborating on. And we decided that our lead character was a guy who didn't want to go on this journey, but was forced to, because he'd been found screwing the commander's daughter in his plane while doing loop-the-loops. And the guy was given the choice to go with the volunteers to China, or to be court-martialed and embarrass the hell out of everybody. So he goes there, happens to be one of the best flyers. His best buddy's going there because he believes in democracy and fighting for the good of people. And he gets killed. And Chenault, who's this mad, wonderful, charismatic leader, comes to him and says, you have to take on the leadership role. Our men are going to die if you don't teach them what you know. And he says, I don't want responsibilities. I just want to get away. And he says, no, we need you. And he says, you don't understand. My father was an accountant in 1929. And when people started to lose their houses, their futures, their whole stock things, he went into a bar, got drunk, and killed himself because he thought he was responsible. And he says, you're not your father. These men need you. And we discovered the nugget, which was the crucible of why this character's journey was valuable to us as an audience. because what he was doing was struggling to put himself in the right place to be the person who he would be if that damage hadn't happened to him. And what you're actually rooting for is the tactics and the evolution of him to become fulfilled. And so from that one nugget, I've always applied that, and it sounds really easy. It isn't. It's writing is incoherent. Sometimes I will get what we call islands of sanity. We might get several scenes and then try and figure out how to patch the rest of it together. Sometimes you get a whole gestalt in the shower. Showers are great for creativity.
Yes, they
and
are.
Holy crow! I have to go, and I have paper and what they call space pens in the shower so I can write in the wet. But this thing that John and I were able to dialogue about, talk with other writers about, was the spine of a story is to take some very simple element of life that is there's a tragedy or is an inhibiting thing that has taken away the future of somebody, and then to use that as the internal journey of the character. Another example of that, which is a woman is getting married to a guy, and she starts to feel like he's suffocating her. And that if she marries him, she's never going to have freedom, because wherever she is, he's going. And he's trying all the time. And she's so present in her life, she decides to call off the wedding. And he says, no, you don't understand. When I was 5 years old, my mother left our home, and I didn't love her enough to keep her. And she says, I'm not your mother. You have to give me my freedom. And that's the entire story for that love story.
Yeah.
And excuse me, I'm so sorry. And that's actually a phone call from the guy that told me where the CBC was putting up money for the movie that ended up changing my life.
Wow. Okay, that's a great synchronicity. I love it. That story that you just told, I'm reading I'm fascinated by Howard Hughes. Very complex guy, and I just love these flawed, complex guys. And when he was engaged to Faith, when she was like 16, that was almost that exact story, and his relationship with his mom. So let's see. I want to get to the photography, and then we'll go back to talking about some of this. But it truly is absolutely a master's class. And thank you. I mixed up oxytocin and our adrenals, and get all worked up, and the oxytocin comes in.
You get a bit of both.
You have to.
Again, when we're looking at this area, stress is one of the things we struggle with, and stress is designed into us. It's a useful thing when you look at it positively, but stress also can be overwhelming. And I studied stress because in my 20s, I was so freaking stressed out. I was, really burned out, having paranoias and, panic attacks, and found that the way you overcome it is you welcome the problems in instead of trying to push against them because they're imaginary. And that stress only can fit in when you're actually not doing something. But I also found a guy called Hans Selye who said that when you put yourself in service to others, your stress becomes eustress, as euphoria, as opposed to distress. And his thing was that when you're servicing the purpose of something that you believe in, and that can be anything you believe in that's passionate for you, it will actually, in a way, ameliorate your sensitivity to stress. But the difference between excitement and anxiety is when you were going on a roller coaster and you loved it, that's excitement. If someone strapped you on a roller coaster, you didn't want to be there, that was anxiety. And so you have to try and find purpose in the things that are your roller coasters.
I love it. For the audience who's been with me for a long time, and my students who I hope are watching tonight, and if not, I'm sending you a link to this. I talk about the gap where the character is and where they want to be, and that gap is that alchemical cauldron where all of the things that you're talking about. And I think that the nugget is intimately related. I love that you talk about the nugget in Riding the Alligator, and I had never heard it in those terms before. And as you know, talking about the same tools but in different ways with different language is so helpful. So thank you for that. Let's switch to your photography.
Okay.
After just one other quick thing, the only actor that I have ever pilgrimaged to meet, since we're talking about synchronicities, is Michael Biehn. who I
Oh, wow.
absolutely love him. And of course, he starred in a show. He did 22 episodes over 2 seasons on CBS, The Magnificent Seven. Now, I follow your Facebook and all of that closely, and there's always good gems there. Is that the one where they said it was the greatest Western on television of all time?
Somebody in Europe said it was the greatest Western of all time. And actually, they're now going to remake the series. Unfortunately, we're not involved with it.
Oh,
But we had great fun. Again, John and I, we studied The Magnificent Seven. We broke it down. We thought it was an extraordinary movie. We actually carded it out to understand why it was so satisfying. And it had some bearing on writing Robin Hood for me, because I understood that you're putting together a group of underdogs and to take on impossible odds. And there's the beauty of the Magnus. I can watch it over and over again and still be absolutely enthralled. And that group of 7 characters, whether it's the 7 dwarfs, the Magnificent Seven, 7 samurai, Ocean's 11, these groupings have a biological purpose, which is, finding cohesion and then overcoming some obstacle. And so the Magnificent Seven, we had actually tried to get permission to remake the feature. And the rights at MGM were not owned, but they said you could try the TV show. And so we got to cast it with people like Ron Perlman and Michael Biehn. And it's just gorgeous actors. And John threw himself into the mix. He was on the set every day. I was running the music. I was helping with the screenplays, and so John, in the case of Robin Hood, did the same thing. He put his body on the line. I say he was up to his ass in mud and arrows when we were making that movie, and I was working script and trying to hold off other elements of our lives to keep things together, and also we ended up taking over the edit, where we were able to really cohese the movie into a vision of the original screenplay. So it's a wonderful experience.
Wow.
The next 7, and Robin Hood or Young Guns in the Air, those are all projects that have a similar underdog taking on impossible odds that impassioned us. And I've written screenplays when we were desperate for money and our company needed funds, and it was like pulling words out of my flesh, because I was in the wrong place with the wrong emotional content. And when I wrote one of my most personal and most emotional movies called Malflanders, that was like being transported. It was like the muses came and dictated, and words flowed. And I knew for 2 years I was going to write it before I did. But once it started to ignite, and I only got 4 lines of dialogue at the end of a movie, and it made me cry. And I didn't tell John and my other partner, because they were men, that I was thinking about writing this woman's story. Who am I to write a woman's story? But I did tell my assistant, who had written her thesis on Sheroes at Brown, and that letting your creative energy come out of you from your unconscious was the most magical writing I've ever experienced. And Houdini, again, was that kind of writing. Only Houdini, I had an ending that impassioned me, but I started off writing it as a Broadway musical.
Oh.
And because most of his life took place on a stage, and so you could keep repeating things. And I decided if I put a seance on a stage, that it would then resonate back to his life. And so that process of letting things come out of you, and trying to overcome doubt. And what I say about writing is, the first draft should be the Lewis and Clark. Any freaking way to the coast is legitimate. Just get it out of you. You can't be criticizing yourself for not knowing where you're going when you've never been there. What you have to do is get to the end of the journey. Then you can write the guidebook. And so the second layer is when you put the freeway through and cut off all the odds and ends and the things you don't need. But you have to have the freedom to just let it come out of you. And what you're doing is, no human being is the same. Each of us have had our own crises, our own DNA, our own epigenetics. What we're doing is, we're in the zeitgeist that we're in, and each of us has something to contribute. If we write from that place, And that's your voice. And that's the magical thing, that you're growing and nothing is lost. Even if that project doesn't sell, you have increased your muscles in that creativity. And I find I write 2 or 3 forms that are very similar in comedy or serious, that still has a similar pattern. And when I was making Mo Flanders, I was lucky enough to be on the set to direct Morgan Freeman and Robin Wright. John was with me and he said, how come none of your characters have mothers? And I go, oh, Robin Hood, no mother. Mo Flanders is about a woman whose mother is hung the day she's born, because in England they would do that, and then she loses her own daughter. And, you know, Houdini is a man who so needed his mother's love that when she died, he tried to reach her through psychics, and then got angry when he realized that they were just cheating and lying and using magic. And I'm going, I had no idea. That's so freaking naive that I had no idea that these stories were coming through me with this very, very thin veneer of loss, and always had reconciliation at the end. And another friend of mine was reading, I've said, I got a new script. Oh, I'd love to read it. I always cry at the end of your scripts. I'm going, oh, yeah, I write scripts where people come together at the end successfully. Moll gets her daughter back. Houdini, even though he's a spirit, gets to see his wife, and maybe it's her imagination, or maybe they get to be with each other for a few moments. And Robin Hood marries Maid Marian, and the king turns up, and it's all, you know. So again, I say to people, right from that joy of trying to find the thing that impassions you and let it out of you, and then trust that you can shape it and sculpt it, and not that you have to write perfectly, but that all writing is evolving as you discover more about what you've written. And I've worked on some projects for years and still are making discoveries of things that make them better and stronger and more likely to sell.
Right. Right. Oh, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but this is a master's class. Like the audience must be absolutely loving this. Guys, I haven't even come into the chat room. I swear I'll look at your comments after the show, but we don't. You mentioned carding Magnificent Seven. These came in the mail a half an hour before. This represents endless projects and opportunities, my colored index cards for our audio audience that'll listen to this in 3 weeks, colored index cards. So let's move to your photography.
Yes, photography. Sorry. Yes.
No.
And what, if you see behind me, I have, 60 antique cameras. I live around cameras. I loved and dreamed that I would actually be able to do things with cameras that would blow me away. And in my earliest life, I carried a camera since I was 11. And as I said, my parents would pick on me, call me the egotistic, the big I am. What am I doing running around with a camera? And I managed to get a job at 15 in a photography store where they took weddings and portraits, and that wasn't for me. And then I got a job in a factory where I was in the photography department, and that wasn't for me, and tried to start my own world, because I could never get the camera by doing everything right, by doing the right exposures, the right sharpness, the right hyperfocal distance, the right saturations, or the right compositions, to be very special. They didn't blow me away. And I took some really possible good photos, but I found that I think the system rewards repetition, and it sort of repeats itself. And so Ansel Adams will all do those kinds of wonderful rocky things with the fog and the way the thing flows. Or we'll do wonderful portraits that are always written the same, lit the way that you're supposed to light. And I had lost my energy, stayed working in the film world, because I could move more things around, sound and all kinds of things to make the magic happen. And watching my daughter using my Nikons at 14, and no one had taught her anything, and she was just taking pictures, and these pictures were plants with weird focus points, and she was holding something and her hand was out of focus, but the background was in focus, but it made you disrupted from the experience, so you couldn't dismiss it. It interfered with your normality. And I started to think, maybe I'm doing this wrong, and there's a poetry here that I've never felt. And I also read an article in a website that I liked called Luminous Landscape, and this would have been probably 2008, 2010. And the article included a phrase which is, "Why are you holding the camera steady?" Well, I was told to. I'm supposed to breathe like I'm shooting a gun and just gently press. And I was on a trip with some friends on the Okefenokee Swamp, and the swamp is filled with particulates, and it's like a big black waving mirror. And I was in the front of a boat that was a little tourist boat, and I was inches above the waterline, and I'm watching this undulation with the sunlight dancing, and I'm going, what if I try photographing that and moving the camera? And I got these weird, wonderful striations. I had no idea what they were. I didn't know if they were good or bad, but they were pleasing. And the idea of trying to break free of the conventions seeded itself there. And my wife decided to buy me the camera I bought for my son, which was my first digital camera. And she knew I wouldn't buy my son a bad camera. So it had 10 megapixel RAW. The entire back of it was a viewfinder. And I'd wade out in the waves in Hawaii and hold my camera up. And I said, never buy a camera you wouldn't climb a tree with. And when the wave went out, I brought it right down at sunset and shot all the curlicues that were going out with all the colors of the sunlight bouncing off them. And these cauldrons were pleasing. And yet I didn't have any terminology to explain them. And then I decided to shoot trees. And there's some gorgeous trees that are so evocative, and they're stretched to the sky, and you've got the sun behind them. And whether it's trees with red leaves that are glowing, or whether it's trees that have these giant limbs reaching to God, and started to, sometimes I would shoot really sharp, sometimes I would move the camera, sometimes I would zoom and shooting maybe 4-second shot or 2-second shot, or just to see what happened. And the trees danced. And suddenly I'm looking at these things going, okay. And I learned to force myself to look at every image I shot, because I was taking images that I didn't know what they were. And I hadn't seen them before. And sometimes I would force myself to adjust. So I'd sharpen, I would add contrast, I would maybe add saturation, but everything was in camera. I don't own Photoshop. I wouldn't know how to use it. I'm analog. And don't confuse me with all these terms like luminance and, I don't know what I'm doing my stuff in the most simple thing, which is Apple Photos, with a couple of plugins, very darker, lighter, sharper, brighter. I can get that. And I end up with things that blow my mind. And I don't necessarily recognize them right away, but when I tighten up and I'm emotional and I suddenly choke up, I know I found one. And I found one yesterday, and I put it up on Instagram. And it was just water reflections. And we have my own koi pond, and I put my cast of characters. I chose every koi because I wanted those colors and shapes and scales. But we also had a water flow going into the pond. When I shot through the water flow with sunlight on it, with longer exposures, suddenly you get these lines and these sculptures and things that are happening with colors underneath that like nothing I've ever seen. Then you go, well, this is stupid. Who wants this? Then you go, but it looks just like abstract art. And I stopped using photography as my judge. And I started to look at abstract art and realized that I was over here. And I've never seen anybody doing most of what my photography looks like. And there's a few people that I think are extraordinary in photography. I'm not saying that I'm special or good. I just, for me, found that I was doing things I never expected to do. And some of these, and the other thing I learned was have a couple of art friends who are very creative, and they said, don't do them small. So most of my stuff is 3 foot, 6 foot. I'm in the process of, I think the deal has gone through for a 10-foot piece that's going to go into an office in New York City. And when you put something that's full of color and shape and form and motion, on a wall, it transforms the room. And that blew my mind as well, because suddenly your colors are coming out of the carpet and out of the furniture, and you're realizing that these are immersive, and they tell a story. I'm saying I'm doing music for the eyes. I'm the Jimi Hendrix of the camera, you know?
Yeah.
And they're poetry, but they're poetry, and I think because I'm so much a filmmaker, I wasn't satisfied unless there was an intricacy to the way the compositions lured you in and gave you emotions, but emotions without a specific structure. So in other words, it wasn't a tree, because if you get so familiar with things, they don't affect you anymore. But when you see a tree that is all movement and shape, and which has got sunlight burning through it, and it suddenly looks like the vibrations of life, and I, find the title "We Breathe for You," and suddenly it looks like the oxygen exchange is in your head. Those things affect people like a Rorschach test. They give them a relationship to something that causes a three-dimensional experience, that you're watching this thing, looking at it, but it's also making you fire off information about your feelings, but that information doesn't have words. It has an emotion. It's bypassing your logic systems, and it's cutting into some kind of biological process. And I'm thrilled to be exploring that, and I'm so excited because I'm exploring, knowing I don't yet know what I'm going to find.
Yes. Right. Which goes back to what you were talking about. In your book, you specifically say, don't beat yourself up if you lose your way in the navigation, because you don't know where you're going. One of the seminal things in my career, or is my journey as a creative, let's say as a professional creative, when I got really serious, was reading Peter Brook, right? Director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, wrote The Empty Space, right? And he says a director is a guide to a place that he's never been. And I love that as a director. We have to take that journey of discovery, which you demonstrate. So here's what we're going to do. And if you can stay with me past the hour, that's great. Guys, you don't want to leave. Stay for another 10 minutes or so. What I've done is I put together a slideshow. And here was my experience of your art. I hope this will be instructive and interesting for you. So I started following your page over a year ago, your Facebook page, and saw this photography. Well, this is very interesting, in line with this. My wife's very interested now in production design and set dressing. So we'll stop a film, look at the mise-en-scene, everything you were just talking about now. So I went through, I pulled up your photo section from Facebook and just started right-clicking and going through them. And I picked, as something caught my eye, I picked it. I said, okay, I'm going to pick 25. I'll stop when I hit 25. Okay. And then what I started doing, Pen, is rearranging them and grouping them. My own humble attempt to go, wait a minute, there's an unfolding energy here. I'm putting myself on the line here a little. That's what we do as artists. So this is sort of my conception of the flow and rhythm of some of your work. Now, guys, there's a 114-page book called Qualia. Can you define that for us, Qualia?
Well, Qualia is a term that I was doing this work trying to find how to explain it to people. And Qualia is this term where it's a philosophical term for things that can't be expressed in words. And I've hung on to that because it's about building that bridge back to people that don't yet understand, and how do I make them feel involved and to feel their biological life force in the joy of being part of nature, and to readdress the conventions that we have of not thinking about ourselves as living in nature in cities and knocking away all of these things. But there's a thing called biophilia, which is a science that has said that people get better in a hospital quicker if they can actually look out the window and see trees. Mm-hmm. And in Japan, there are things called forest bathing, where you walk through a forest and touch everything, and it increases your endorphins and increases your sense of belonging, and it opens up your life form. And we're all these collections of atoms in this weird, wonderful universe with billions of freaking planets and things, and we forget that. And it is not that I think I'm the solution, but I think I'm on part of the hope to be opening people to feeling connected to life in a way that they had not had since they were children.
Well, I certainly got, I mean, they really started to speak to me as I was putting them in the PowerPoint, and then I went to check it. So let's go through. I'm just going to click through every couple of seconds. I'm going to put up a new one. You talk as much or just watch or whatever you want to do. I apologize. My wife, Tanya, says, I was just going to say your photographs make me think of a secret language with nature.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And honestly, as an artist, my job is to put this out and allow people to make their discoveries. My art is not to control what you feel, but to let you feel what you do because it speaks to you. This tree is called the rainbow eucalyptus, and it exists. And my wife and I were in Hawaii driving to Hana and stopped at a little park, and we saw these trees with this Disneyland kind of color, and they blew me away. And I found one of these on our last trip to Hawaii, and I just wanted to try and capture that beauty. And apparently, on the technical side, as the tree's bark strips, the sun burns different colors so that they change colors because they're exposed to light differently. But for me, this was again, it's a sensory experience. It's organic. That it's somehow a living form, and yet it confuses you because you feel beautiful, but also you see it's moving. Even if it's not moving, your eye will move on it. And I when I was directing Mull Flanders and Houdini, I tried to fill the frame with what I call clutter, so that you could not look at an image and dismiss it. I hate it when people shoot a movie and there's everybody against plain backgrounds. They just got a couple of pieces of furniture. I would hang coats on the wall. I would put cracks in the wall. I would have doorways and things that so there's alcoves and nooks, so that your mind is imagining places and things which are part of the scenery. And so I was creating, and with this, there is a journey for your eye when you look at this. It takes you, and it gives you a reward because your eye keeps looking around it and finding more and more things that are pleasant, I hope. And I go back to my work, and I found this the other day and realized I'd overlooked it, and decided, no, I'm putting it up. I'm going to see how people respond to it. And I actually got a great deal of joy when I finally put it up.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. These are just stunning, crystalline. What is that actually?
That's a fountain in a park.
Wow.
And the beautiful thing about water when you put it in the air like that is it becomes rainbows. And I discovered that we may end up with one somewhere along here. A friend of mine and I shared a love of koi, and he had a big koi pond in the back of his design store. He designs homes for billionaires, and he designs restaurants and things. And he had this large koi pond. And I'm there one day, and I'm thinking, I would love to shoot koi through falling water. Maybe I could get a hose and put the lens right up against it, so the koi would become colors. And I said to the gardener as he was going by, do you have a hose? And he says, yeah, I missed the trees here, and when I do, I see rainbows. And I go, oh. So me and the gardener ran around for a couple of hours while I'm shooting through the rainbows. Now this is a straight up shot. This is just, again, another. I just love the koi and the form, and that's also again, motion, joy. The koi are flying. And you're free, and most of my images tell a story in a way that your eye will often go from left to right, like you're reading, and they feel very satisfying. And again, I'm hoping that the viewer finds something of their own sense of freedom and evoking energies that are sort of like uplifting. So
Yeah. Let's see what I went back and this one here.
yeah, I fell in love with trees with red leaves. My wife and I were at a museum that has in Napa, which has all kinds of sculptures over its about 4 or 5 acres. And as we were lining up to go into the museum, she pointed out that the tree right outside the museum was a red leaf tree, and the sun was shining through it, getting close to sunset. And she said, "Do you think you could do anything with that?" And I go, "I don't know. Let's see." And by moving the camera, and I probably did 100 images, and did all kinds of experiments and explorations and different lenses and different exposure lengths. And the results, this is a very happy, energized, fun, warm piece. And what you're seeing is red leaves, sunlight, and blue sky.
Yeah, wow. So when you say that the camera is a brush for you and not a lens, I would guess that this is a very good example of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on.
I say nature is my palette. Yeah. Oh gosh, you got that one. How fun.
Yeah, I love it. And you talk so much about the trees. I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to show them, which was great.
Yeah.
That is just gorgeous.
Yes.
And then
I never know what and there's the complete reverse, right? I'm not locked into anything. I'm really trying to find ways of breaking my conventions so that I'm open to the joy of finding things. And this one just seemed like leaves lining up to fly away. And there's a little tiny piece of mountainside in the background to give you a sense of depth. And the colors of leaves, God, I love fall. Oh, fall is so beautiful. It's rainbows of colors coming off leaves, and there's a nostalgia and a poignancy about fall too, because these leaves have all given their life so that the tree may live for the next, but also given us life, and so they're celebrations.
Yeah. Are you familiar? You mentioned that there's a childlike aspect to your photography. So I wanted to ask, I'm looking at this one. Do you know the children's books of Eric Carle?
No, I don't.
Oh, you should look at them. This is very much his color palette. And I think you would love it. You would love it very much. And then you go,
yeah,
I don't want to say minimalist, but I mean, this is very natural.
Yes. And again, if you look at it, it reads left to right, and and if you look at it for any period of time, your eye will find all kinds of different levels of decay. But there's beauty in the decay. There's an honor in that these leaves have given us what they've given us. They're not corrupted in their passing, but there's a beauty and a dignity, like an aged person should be valued and not just dismissed.
I love it. And there's that little hint of purple there, which I just absolutely love. So you keep saying they're meant to be read from left to right. I have a very kooky, I call it the quirky workings of my mind.
For me, they do, but that doesn't mean to say it's right or wrong. However you look at them.
For me, they go from the lower right-hand corner up diagonally up into the left. Yep. So that was just fascinating how we're seeing them different and the tracking. So audience, as you're looking at these, like, how do you track them? Like, let us know. That will be fun. Gorgeous.
Yeah. And that's a very touristy shot. And I put those in every now and again, just because I'm a sucker for that kind of, I love shooting water and all forms of water. I have a series I call Unlimited States of Water. And this is in the fjords they're in New Zealand, and they're called sounds there. And after a rain, the water just floods down in these lines, and it's not so much it's very much of a standard image, but it's an image that, again, every now and again, I like to put one in and say, "See, I can do the real photos too." You know?
This I'm just blown away by.
Yeah, that's just water. I think it's water behind a boat, and it's got all these, again, dancing elements, and there's, water and waves are like sculptures that only last for a brief second, and they're never the same twice, and they're never going to be there again. And it's like our lives, we're here, and we should enjoy what we are, and not regret or not doubt. And water and waves are constantly renewing themselves, and so there's always something new happening. And it's we came from water, 4 billion years of it. So we should be able to, in some way, feel something if it connects, and you're able to see that you're a participant in this experience. And we are, what was it, like 90% water?
Yeah. And I need to be near water. If I'm away from water too long, I feel it. So I spent a lot of time at the Jersey Shore, and then water changing every single second. I followed my theater mentor from the Jersey Shore to the Arizona desert, which was wonderful for a storyteller. Yeah. And he said, Joey, think about it, where we met and where we were for so long and created art, it changes every millisecond. Look at these mountains. They've been here for millions of years, virtually unchanged. And that was wild. So I have a couple more of the water. Oh no, the water is going to come after the mandalas. Okay. So did you stumble upon this? Was it something that you set out to do? I'm going to click through them and I'll click back and you talk about them.
This is, when I was working in the factory, I'd read somewhere that human beings have two sides to their faces, and that if you shot them and flipped the image and printed it and then cut the sides and put them together, you would get two different people. Yes. And so I did that with the management of the factory. And lucky my boss would let me play with the darkroom and things. And the very first thing I sold to a professional photography magazine when I was 16 was an article about myself reflected in all kinds of surfaces. And it was called Go Shoot Yourself. And the logic was that if you couldn't afford to have someone shoot a portrait of you, you could at least go out and make images of yourself. And those things sort of stayed with me. And the idea of what happens if I make these mirrored kaleidoscopic images were an experience of discovering. And again, there's magic in them for me. They travel. You see things in them, especially if you see things, you'll see faces in them. And there's an exquisite sort of universal feel to some of them. They feel like they're in space, and that's water reflections. When my wife and I bought a house, one of the things we did was we planted tabulia trees, bougainvillea, and wisteria above our koi pond. And my logic was that I would then be able to shoot the koi through the reflections. And so this is a fun story. When we sold our house, the people that were buying the house wanted to keep our koi, and I didn't have a new pond. So we made a deal, which is I had visitation rights written into our contract.
I love it.
So I could go back at certain seasons to go photograph. And when I went back, I was so upset because it'd been really hard to find a time that was convenient for the new owners. And they just put an algicide into the koi pond, and the water was green. Mm. And I thought, oh, damn. And then I said to myself, no, stop being an asshole. This is the light that you've been given. And so start shooting. And what happened was, and this is, again, another mirroring, I double mirrored this one to see what would happen. Constantly explore, constantly ask questions, constantly try. You don't know. I cannot predict what I'm going to discover when I put these together. I could not look at a single image and flip it and tell you what it's going to look like. Everyone is a brand new discovery. But here, what was happening as well is that the green, as the further the fish went down, the colors changed and the densities changed. And again, it gave a kind of a vortex feeling. And, it's so much fun. And the fish are flying,
Yeah. Let's see what else we have. Well, again, Tanya says, to me, the movement in each one is different. The sense of flow and live energy is palpable. That's really what I discovered. Like, I was being kind of perfunctory. I was going, okay, well, we're going to talk about his photography, so I'm going to put it in a PowerPoint. And suddenly they started popping in relation to each other. And I just sat there for an hour just changing the order and going, how does this? So I understand these are just I think there's three
Yeah.
or four
Oh, I love
just
that one. Yeah, actually, I
absolutely
love
gorgeous.
all of them, but that one here, the
Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
back to, if you can, to
Oh yeah.
that. For me,
Yeah.
that again, that's an absolute discovery. I'm shooting on a 400 mil lens, and it has an f40 f-stop, which means that I can actually hold waves in focus. And I'm also shooting after sunset, and that, because it's a digital camera, I can call on an ISO, which is really enables me to shoot in quite dark conditions, and it's lit like it's normal. And then I'm shooting probably again, I'll shoot with all kinds of different experimental shutter speeds. I don't know which ones are going to produce what, but this particularly feels to me again like stepping stones through it, and it's just I just love it, and
Yeah.
it's magical to me.
Yeah, to me, you know exactly what you're looking at, but yet it's fibrous, and so it looks woven, and so it's saying I'm not just one thing, I'm many things, and I think that's what life and nature really are. Again, just gorgeous. This stunning. Again, is that a koi there?
Yep, that's two koi. One is tail is out of the water, and the other one is going underneath it. And that's we were spraying the water with the misting, which is you can't see the mist, but it broke the surface of the water into particulates,
Yeah.
and that breaking up is again it's like abstract art. It's taking it from being it's real, and you know it's real, and yet it feels um, like it's gone through some kind of transformation, becoming something else that you can actually appreciate.
Right. I'm glad I included
I'm
that.
really fascinated because I've never done this before. Talked about my work like this.
Oh, you
This is
haven't? Okay, that's terrific.
no, this is
The audience isn't leaving, so we got another 4 or 5. Tell us about this.
much longer exposure. Um, that's koi moving through the flow out of my fountain. That was not a fountain; it was like a waterfall that went into my koi pond. And again, a longer exposure, letting it allow and the streaks. One of the things again is that once you stop shooting hardcore and you shoot with sunlight reflecting, the sunlight reflections become lines, and you can end up with these very calligraphic shapes and forms. And then the flow of the koi through it gives it an energy, and you can't plan this. This is go see what you can catch in your net, and then what you catch you learn how to cook, because this might be one of 100 images that I've taken, and I've forced myself, as I said, to look at every one. And sometimes I'll take the settings that I've set on one image and put them on another one just to see what it evokes, because I'm shooting what is called raw, which is the data that the camera records, not the algorithm that the manufacturer puts on the camera to give you perfect skin tone, perfect sky, perfect whatever. I'm going into the data and allowing myself to feel what my algorithm says. What do I feel, and how sharp do I want it? And sometimes I find that muting the contrast on something actually draws you in instead of making it sharp. Muting it pulls you into the mystery of it, the mist of it. And this is one of those.
Yeah, gorgeous, and thank you for taking us behind the scenes and how you do. This is
Yeah.
it almost looks like a tree frog or something to me. What is it actually?
Actually one single tabulia blossom, and
Wow.
above it, reflected, is the tree that we planted.
Oh, wow. Wow. So instinctually, I think I made some good choices here.
Oh,
And this one.
wow. Yeah. Again, thank you. Again, water fascinates me, and I actually got a grant when I was about 25 to shoot water reflections, and we then used some of the images I created in some of the title sequences and things we did. But again, this to me there's something hard and rocky and sort of like perpetual about the rock, and the indentations in it give it an age. And then you have this incredible sunlight, bouncing, glorious, warm happiness, and the two together are somehow they're coordinated. They're a dance. They're a duet.
Yeah.
And again, I've never verbalized this before, so
Good.
you're now forcing my qualia to undo and become words, because I'm just looking at this when I'm making it and going, that feels emotionally lovely.
Yeah, and that's what translated. So again, I feel like I was really in sync, which I'm glad about, to do you and your work justice. The last three, I think you'll be very pleased what I chose, because they show them in space, which is what you were talking about. They're designed to be in space and to be big. So this is amazing.
Yeah, that's at the Guggenheim Museum in Spain, and there's a large sculpture. Can't remember the name of the artist. I should do, but it's like a 30-foot sculpture of a dog, and it's covered in floral plantings. And when I turned around and saw that the building was like this music, and it's like notations, and so I'm a sucker for reflections.
Yeah.
You can pull me in anytime.
And there's one in space, which I wanted to show the size and the scale of it, which is wonderful. And then I had to include you with one of them.
Thank you.
To finish us up. So let's see, we're at 1 hour and 21. Can you do a full 90 minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay, because the audience just isn't leaving.
This guy, you and I are, having a great time. It's
yeah.
I would love to explore what your thoughts are, and you feeding me back my work is fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's what I would like to finish up with. I'd like to do a James Lipton inside the actor studio kind of thing. There are words that jump out to me because they resonate so strong. The first one, and I'm not going to talk about any of these except the first one. I'm just going to say, what does this mean to you? This work. But I was so excited in your books, especially in the Creative's Success Manual, to hear you talk about passion.
Yes.
Because I have so much passion, and I go into meetings and they'll go, you have a lot of passion. Like, you really get excited about stuff. And I would say probably 8.5 times out of 10, it's a compliment. And the others, I think it's a little frightening. So passion, what does that mean to you, and why is that important to your work?
Well, I was able to teach at USC 3 times, the Harvard Film Schools, and the irony of me leaving school at 15 is very fun. And I was in what they call the pitching class, so I had to ask myself, what would I? And one of our ex-development executives had taken me to lunch once and said, "You got to write a book on creativity." I'm not writing a book. Oh, that's overwhelming. Not going to go near that. And then my partner John, who ended up being one of the beloved teachers at USC, had said, "You got to come and try this." And I thought, okay, if I'm going to try it, I'm going to write one chapter of my book and see what these people would most benefit from. I wanted to write the book wasn't there to encourage me when I was starting out. And these were MFA film writers. And my first chapter, everything I did was organic. I surrendered to what my body wanted to write. And the first chapter it wanted to write was passion. And so I let it come out of me. And one of the funny things is these things come out of you and then you kind of don't like them. And I find that late at night, definitely don't like my work. In the morning, I feel better. And then you can usually see, oh, you take that sentence, and then it becomes much more cohesive. And then a year later, you really say, I couldn't write that. Someone put a gun to my head. I don't know. So passion. And what the other thing I was trying to find was a simple way to help arm students to go out into the world, because we teach you how to make something. We don't teach you how to sell it. And if you're not armed with confidence to be able to go out and feel that you're normal. And so my 4 rules of pitching were, first thing is, people don't buy from strangers. if you don't actually fire up the oxytocin, the trust chemical, if you don't show that you know something about these people, which is why you're there, that you can compliment them honestly with authenticity, because people can take bullshit, but you can say, listen, go to chat GTP and look up the people and see what you can find out about them, and take that into the meeting and talk to the assistants and say, can I bring you a coffee when I come in? To just be a human being, because what we're trying to be in a pitch is someone they would like to work with.
Yes, amen.
And somebody that they can trust, that they're not going to lose their job over because you're an asshole and you pretend that you're doing something you don't really. So first thing is find common cause, find an ally in the people. Maybe you both love the same football team. But it doesn't take a lot because it's only a meeting. But meetings are really an interview for you to be, and people teach you to do the elevator pitch, which is stupid. The elevator pitch just excludes everybody. The goal is to share. Second thing I say is demonstrate passion. If you're not excited, where should they be? And so the more passion, I say that an inarticulate, passionate pitch is a much more powerful one than an elevator pitch, which is just a rote running of something. The passion is intriguing because as a human, we're attracted to see what it was that got you so excited. Maybe it'll do that for us. So that's the next thing. Then I say, you've got to find illustrations of something that you're trying to sell that are going to fire up the hopes and aspirations of your buyer. And that means that you're framing, and we call it framing devices, what you're going to sell them in terms of successes they'd like to be associated with. And this is not real, but it's how I chose to demonstrate it. I said, in order to sell passion, I said, my wife had a dream and it kept her up at night. And then she told me the dream, and I started to say, whoa, this is too fucking scary. I don't know. But I decided I'm going to turn it into a story, and I'm going to make my wife so happy that I'm doing her story. And the story is partly Exorcist and partly Alien. And so, but what I'm doing is I'm putting up two goalposts. And what I'm teaching the buyer is the handles that he can go to his boss and say, well, this is like The Exorcist meets the Alien. And I'm now got two of the most major science fiction and supernatural stories ever. And those people would love to be able to deliver that. And they know what that goal is, and they know how to sell it. When I was talking to people about Robin Hood, I talked to the salespeople at Warner Brothers, people we've made friends with. We would go out, John and I would go out of our way to go meet the people that are in the story department, go meet the people in the sales departments, because that's our job. And no one ever talks to them. And so I talked to the guy who was running Warner's testing. I said, why did the Black Knight, why did Batman work? And he said, well, because we found that people thought it was the stupidest thing, but when we called it the Dark Knight, we wiped their memories of all the pow, all that silly stuff. Yeah. And so I kept referring to Robin Hood as the Dark Knight of Robin Hood. And that helped the studios get a grip on a success that they'd already experienced, so they weren't scared of something new. So taking the energy of a discovery like that, you're trying now to find how do you translate that to your buyer. So by saying The Exorcist meets Alien, I'm trying to give them tools that reinforce their critical strengths without them having to think it out. They don't have the time to think it out. They got to pick up the groceries to get home. They got 4 scripts to read. So you, without talking down to them, you just design how. If you put a lot of choices up, they're going to get confused. And also, if you put lame choices up, there was a movie like that last year, but did it succeed? No. Well, why are you telling them that?
Right.
Don't go small on your project. Find the most potent things that you can that these people would like to be associated with. And then once you said it's like The Exorcist meets Alien, and here's my pitch. My pitch is NASA takes an ex-alcoholic defrog priest to the moon. They found an ancient spaceship there with creatures on it that look like devils, and astronauts are starting to get possessed. I could sell that.
Yeah.
My pitch. But they won't get it if I say astronauts, priests did it on the moon. You've got to go through those steps of telling them why it would be successful by using the analogies, and it really helps you. And then the other thing that I talked Kodak into giving a sales course to the filmmakers in Canada. And one of the key things was eliminate the objections. That is new, different, and it's hard for people. So they will have objections, and it's easier to reject than it is to answer yes. So what you've got to do is hear their objections and find ways that are humanistically tuned in to their needs so that you can actually solve their problems with your project. And if you don't ask the questions, you won't get the sale. Right. And so you got to say, you know, what is it about this that you feel doesn't quite connect for you? And then if they're being honest, they'll say, well, you know, and you go, oh, I get that. Yeah, I can see how you feel that, because you're not trying to tell them they're fools. What you're trying to do is to understand what their goals are and trying to reframe what you've created or what you're hoping to create in terms that they understand. And where this worked, I had my script for Mol Flanders was, I gave it to the head of UA once I'd written it. Very, very passionate about this project. And he read it. His name was John Calley. He said, I don't quite get it. And so I went and pitched him, because I'm a coward. I'm not good at confrontation, but I so wanted to make this movie. So much was part of my heart and my life force, because it really spoke to my daughter. There's a birth scene in it where Mol Flanders gives birth, and I cry when I watch that scene. And Robin Hood was because I'd had a son. I wanted to create a story that was about the altruism and the makers of life, as opposed to killing people and people standing up and creating futures for other people. And there's a birth scene in Robin Hood, which is where the woodsman's wife is helped to give birth by what would have been their enemy. And again, son was born in an emergency cesarean. And when I was writing that piece, I was crying and feeling, this is stupid. You can't put a birth scene in a Robin Hood adventure. But you know, we ended up, and it was very successful. So these processes of letting your instincts draw you into something, and letting you pitch those things in terms of other people, enjoying them in ways that you couldn't necessarily justify unless you show them examples. But in the case of my Mol Flanders, the head of John then pitched it to the head of MGM, and he phoned me up and said, I love this script. I want to make it. I want it out next year, and it'll be my Christmas movie. And then 3 days later, one of his assistants phoned up and said, no, we're unfortunately, it won't fit into our schedule. And I go, oh, okay. And then I go, I'm going to go talk to the chairman. And, you know, that's that errors of omission thing. And Frank Mancuso had been, he was the chairman of MGM, but he'd actually been working for Paramount in Canada, in Toronto, and had paid to blow up a couple of our short films into the theaters. So it was sort of like an opening and some kind of collaboration. Plus, we'd worked together on a few things. So I get a meeting with him, which is like demanding to meet the Pope. And I walk in, and he says, you know, when Mol started drinking, I thought she was such a bitch that no one would want to see the movie. And I go, oh, well, now I know why the other two people passed on it.
Yeah.
And then I go, oh, Kodak course. Okay, let's be sincere. Why? Would you tell me what it was? And he goes, well, you know, I felt that. I said, you know, I failed to make that clear. That wasn't my intention. She's supposed to go through a test and become somebody that she has to rise above, but I failed that. And I then go, and what else didn't connect for? Because I'd love to know. And he read the whole thing. And I knew that the course said you have to ask maybe 6, 7 times, because the most embarrassing ones, the most difficult ones, come out last, because they don't want to be laughed at, or they don't want to be put down, they don't want to get an argument. And so you're building trust when you ask the questions, and you've got to be sincere about trying to find a mutual sort of solution. And he told me all of his issues. I went away and rewrote it in 3 days, because the issues weren't that bad. And some of it is what I call fusion writing, which is when you introduce a character and the character is difficult and is obnoxious, right? And you're going to love him later on.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're just leaving the audience with that reader with a fear that they're going to spend all this time with a fucking asshole. And so by making sure, and what we also we have this term, asshole proofing. Make things clear that your intentions cannot be misinterpreted. So I went through and did my clarity, did my changes that I felt were very important to Frank Mancuso, and I gave it back to him in 3 days. And my partners were kind of, what are you doing? You're going to screw up things here. Don't get him annoyed, And I was in a meeting at the offices at MGM, and he walked by and he reminded me of my high school principal. He went, my office now, as soon as you're through this meeting. And I went in and he said, that's one of the best scripts in my life. I want to make it. I'm going to give you $10 million. And then we started a year of trying to actually get it made, which was another adventure. But that eliminating the objections and being willing to talk to people to find out why you're not communicating and trying to find, and you can't do that with people that you aren't in a rapport with. You can't do it unless you're both on the same team and both trying to find the same solution, which is a movie that makes a difference. This is a movie that works. And so, most schools don't teach salesmen's courses. And when I went into teach, I was given a syllabus, which was something you need penicillin for. But I read the syllabus from the last one, and there were 32 people reading the same book. And I go, that's a waste of time. So it was like 32 coverages of the same script. Okay. So I found 18 books on selling, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Overcome Procrastination, Save the Cat. And I said to the students, who some of them were in their 40s, by the way, I said, I want you to do something. I want you to read this book and note the 10 most powerful points that you can find in that book that you would share with other students, and write a 1-paragraph description of the book. And then I got them to come up and present those. So within the first 2 weeks, we'd read 18 books.
Yeah, and you shared them generously in here, which I found, as I'm always building my reading list. That was wonderful. So we have run really long, and I could go twice this amount, but let people know where they can find out more about you, where they can get your stuff and all. We're going to bring this to a close tonight. Maybe you'll come back again and we can talk about other things.
I'd like to know some of the things you've learned with all the stuff you've written. And you're writing from the heart. You talked about shamanism, because I do think writers are the shamans of our age, and we're the communicators that need to help the world reinterpret itself so that it can survive. And you also talked about chemistry and quantum physics, and I'd be into another conversation. Believe you me.
Good. Okay, let's set that up where we just riff.
Yeah. Where you can find my stuff is I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I put up images every day, which has changed me, because by putting up images every day, I'm forced to confront that I have to keep letting go of my resistances and keep discovering. So that's been really healthy, and it's grown me. And then I also have Pen Densham Photography, which is my website. And if you go there under books, you can see 2 books that you can actually download, the Success Manual and my photographs book, which is called the Qualia book. And they're both free. My goal is to share what I do. I'm not trying to profit up, and I'm trying to discover who I am and what it is.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're up against so many things. They wouldn't let me put the name of your website. YouTube rejected it as spam.
All right.
That's the world that we live in now. So, folks,
Okay.
That's what it is. It's Pen Densham Photography. I've never had that happen before. It's crazy what we're up against.
Such an exploiter of people giving away stuff.
Yeah, I know. Hard. So please, guys, go. I have a copy of Qualia, and I'm deeply appreciative for that. So everybody, good night. Next week, I just want to tell you something, The Way of Unity, Essential Principles and Preconditions for Peace. Robert Atkinson has really given a lot of thought to this in the world that we live in. Guys, this is not kumbaya. This is not pie in the sky. There is a plan. So please join us. And Pen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joey. I really enjoyed it. The fact that you invested so much time and energy is very, very emotionally meaning to me. Thank you.
Thank you. It was well deserved. All right, folks, we'll see you next week. Peace. And we'll have Pen back again. I promise.